Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families.
And I'm Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And we are excited to have you join us as we talk all things faith, family, and fitness. A special thanks to Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency for their support of Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community one family at a time. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. Hey, this is Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Radio, and I'm here with, again, the lovely Linda.
Well, hi there, honey.
How are you doing?
Good. You having a good day so far?
I am. Boy, it was busy today. I just feel like I'm going from one place to the next, but hey, we finally sat our butt down here in this chair, and we're going to try to put together, hopefully, a good show. This one's a little bit lighter.
Is it lighter?
Yeah, it's a little bit lighter. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun talking.
Last week was, if you did not tune in last week, we did a show on divorce and raising kids through divorce, and that was a tough one, and some hard truths there, but hopefully real solutions. So if you did not have a chance to tune in, you know, we've all been affected by divorce and know somebody, so we hope that it is a ministry that we can help families with just by speaking on it.
Yeah, so tonight's show is going to be a little bit lighter hearted, but extremely effective. This is going to be more in the realm of parenting. Mm-hmm. And we talk all the time about how we can help our kids to be growing towards those adults that we look forward them to being successful and well-adjusted and having good relationships and having a good faith, all of these different things that we talk about, giving them the tools. And this is a tool that, many parents do spend time talking about, but a lot of our kids, because of the culture that we grow in, we seem to see this skill slipping.
Yeah.
So today we are going to talk about communication, effective communication, like how to teach your kids how to communicate with adults, not just with kids, because they just sort of moan and groan.
They have their own language.
They have their own language. But when you actually have your kid outside of the kid group and he has to interact with adults, whether
teachers,
it be,
friends,
relatives, parents, friends, whatever, do they have what it takes to start that conversation
and build relationships effectively? Yeah.
Yes, because these are the things that don't just come natural for most kids.
Right.
And I remember very clearly as a kid, my dad looking at us kids and saying, "Speak up."
Right. Look them in the eye.
Look them in the eye, teaching us what a firm handshake was about.
Right.
And the idea that you would be kind of droop-shouldered and staring at the ground. I remember my brother, Ted, I'm going to throw you under the bus. My brother, Ted, would talk on the phone, and he would mumble.
I remember that. I remember even as a teenager calling your house.
Yes, and my dad would jump his case. Speak up. They can't hear you.
Yeah. So. This is an important skill. So if you're out there and you're a parent or even just an adult, we have so many couples coming in, hun, who don't know how to communicate to one another. Their marriage is in crisis. Their job is in crisis. They're, at risk because they don't know how to communicate effectively. They don't know how to receive words correctly. Right. And so this really is an important skill that we've got to teach our kids. And so you might think this is so common sense, but it really is not. And it's really a lost art, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and there's a difference here, too, in that we speak to people's natural gifts. And some people are gifted in speaking. And you and I, just because we've come through a lot of communication training as being educators and counselors, we sometimes take it for granted that people should be able to just say.
Just know how to do it.
And know how to do things.
Yeah.
There's even a very significant difference in gender. And so we tease all the time. You ladies can spit out 3 times the words that us men can.
I think the quotient is 5 times.
Well, I'm not going to argue that. Good Lord, we know that it's a lot more. And so sometimes when we're bombarded with words or we can't process the words fast enough, we can't maybe think on our feet as well as the person we're speaking with, we become overwhelmed and we maybe shut down.
Right.
And so even if we are not a very talented speaker, there are still very mechanical practices that we can start at a very young age to help us get better and more confident.
Yeah, and that word mechanical, hun, is an interesting one. It may sound so ritualistic or so pragmatic to do this and teach your kids to do this, but if you teach it as a mechanical tradition or practice, then it becomes natural.
Yes.
Secondhand.
Yeah.
So,
and it's one of those things. It is like riding the bike. Once you learn it and you continue to practice it, you can do it throughout your life.
Right.
And you see the dividends that it pays, whether it's trying to do job searches or working with relationships, someday having a spouse or whatever. These are skills that just don't fade away.
Yeah, your last week's show with Jason Boyd, which is a great one on Strong Dads, I heard him speak about how his dad taught him some things about how to communicate with adults, how to speak, how to shake hands, how to look people in the eye, and how he is teaching that to his son. And so those are things that if you're not modeled them, you don't know what you're missing until they're not there.
Yeah. So, hey, okay, before we communicate anymore, we better communicate the message of sponsorship. We want to thank Maxwell Construction for coming behind us. Maxwell Construction was founded in 1988 by John Maxwell. And they have grown and expanded over the years and now become one of the more recognized construction companies in the tri-state area. The thing that separates Maxwell Construction apart from their competition is their dedicated and emphasized work on being service-oriented rather than just another construction company. So whether you're trying to build a school or a hospital, restaurant, apartment, retail center, whatever it is, give Maxwell Construction a call. You can reach them at 812-537-2200.
Yeah, we're so thankful for Maxwell Construction and their support since the beginning, hun, of Rock Solid Radio, which has now been over a year. We also want to thank Mansfield Insurance Agency. Jim Mansfield has built a reputation in business on caring and listening and protecting his customers. Mansfield Insurance Agency began in 1981 and has been dedicated to individuals and businesses in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So if you have insurance needs, whether it be car insurance, life insurance, help, whatever, call Mansfield Insurance Agency at 1-800-230-3927. That's 1-800-230-3927.
All right. So let's get to work here.
Yeah.
We got some announcements we've got to make, okay?
It is October still.
It is October, and we've been getting all kinds of interest in people wanting to do our October special for our finishing classes.
Yeah.
And so those are our exercise classes that we call finishing. We do a lot more than just the finishing exercise. We do lots of other core, stability, mobility type work. And so for the month of October, we are running $10 off our 10-class pass, which is normally $70. And we, during this month, are offering it for $60.
Yeah.
Also, during this month, you can bring a friend and you get to work out free. So
there you go. What a bargain.
Yeah. So, we're on short time. So if you're interested, get in here now and get that pass.
Yeah, just a few days left. So, hun, getting back to our topic of children communicating and learning the skills of communication, especially working with adults and speaking with adults, what do we want for our kids, hun? What do we want them to learn through this?
Well, maybe we should start by seeing what we regularly experience. And, I'm not going to throw our kids completely under the bus, but we have
don't
young
name
kids.
names.
I'm not going to name names. But, we listen to our younger kids and then the kids in our house. And I hear them the other day, our sweet child was trying to tell a story about what happened at school. And it was like, oh my gosh, when is this story going to get to the point? 10 minutes in, I'm now drifted off. She's
not reading
lost
any
me.
social cues of people you've lost them.
And I'm like, okay, so we've got to learn to get to the point. We've got to get to the point. And to do that without being sarcastic or smart alecky back to her, because that doesn't teach her anything.
Right.
And just to help her say, okay, let's work to get to the point, because your audience is not always as interested as you are in the
Give
story.
the highlights. Yeah. We also have found, which was interesting, hun, when we've got 5 children. If you've just tuned into us, 3 of them are adopted, so we kind of have these 2 generations of children, and the years of answering the phone, talking on the phone, the kids today are not doing that. They're texting and emailing back and forth, so they're not Snapchatting back and forth. They're not actually answering a phone and talking to people.
Right.
So our 3 youngest ones, when they came to our home, when we adopted them 4 years ago, they literally did not know how to answer a phone and talk on the phone.
Yeah.
And they would
They would
literally
get
sit
freaked
there.
out. Yeah.
Sit there in silence. And I'm like, why is this such a lost art? And it's because nobody's calling on the phone anymore.
Yeah. You don't have, everyone has their own phone too. So we used to have the family
House phone, yes.
right? And so one person, if you were close, Dad might say, go answer that phone. So you had to learn early. Now, when my phone rings, it usually is in my pocket.
And what's funny is with caller ID, sometimes you won't even answer and say hello. It's almost
I
like
screen all my phone calls.
but you already know like who's calling, so you'll start the conversation right off the bat instead of a greeting like, hi, how are you? Or hello, and so there's just some really very basic skills our kids are not learning.
Getting tripped up on words. When we do ask our kids to speak more formally, all of a sudden they're tongue-tied.
Yeah.
Because there's just that little bit of nervous pressure, like, am I going to say something stupid? Am I going to say the wrong word? And so we get tongue-tied. And, that even happens to adults. If we are in a pressure cooker of a conversation, we get tangled up on words.
Something as simple as going and ordering something at the counter of Wendy's. If your child wants a Frosty, let's say, and you're sitting there in the restaurant and you say, well, go up and order it. They look at you like, I can't do that. I can't go up and talk to an adult. I'm like, yes, you can. Yeah. Just go up there and give them your
way
money.
Too often we see parents rescuing that. Yeah. Parents get everybody's order and then the parent says, okay, I need this, this, and this, and they go through the whole order for the family. And it's like, you just, that was a great opportunity it might have taken an extra minute to give the whole order, but let them speak it and teach them how to speak it.
Yeah.
How about the idea of them just not learning how to speak up and enunciate, as we talked before? We have a child in the house now that mumbles, and they're not lacking the brain power of speaking. It's just part of the voice change thing, part of being just a teenager, and 2 things happen. They mumble and they look away from us. Well, the mumble's bad enough, but with my bad hearing, I'm going, what? What? So I'm teaching them to speak up.
Right. Hun, this one, I really do work with couples all the time, and that's the whole active listening. To read someone's body language, their tone, their posture, and read in between the lines. This is such a skill and a gift to give your children, that they could read. You've taught this before with teachers and students, for the student to walk in the door and your comment is, how are you doing? And to kind of listen in between the words of the teacher, whether they're like, I'm okay. Well, okay, that means nothing.
Fine.
Yeah, fine.
Yes.
I guess I'm okay. Versus I'm good. How are you? Just that positiveness. And so for us to read tone is so important, and it's such a gift and a skill we got to give our kids.
Yeah, I mean, there's estimates out there that say as much as 80% of communication is done without the word.
Nonverbal,
And depending on the type of conversation you're having, I would definitely agree with that in certain areas. I have completely, whenever we're actually doing coaching or counseling type work, I don't do it over texting. I try to resist doing it even over an email. I will hesitate to do it over the phone just because I'll say, well, why don't you just come on in?
Right.
Because whether I like it or not, I'm missing so much of what's really being said.
Phone's a little better because you get tone.
Yeah.
But you don't get eye contact, body posture, nonverbals, whether you're shaking your head like you're doing to me now. And that's important.
Yeah. And so these are things that we just can't take for granted. There's a lot more messaging going on, and we have to teach our kids what is being messaged, how to read it, and how to interpret it. So that's another big part.
Yeah.
Let's see. How about for your kids who are just naturally quiet?
How to engage them.
Yeah, how to get them engaged. So you might have one kid who doesn't want to shut up, and they steal the conversation.
Yeah.
They want to
dominate,
have the last word and say everything. And then you'll have another one who can go for days, it seems,
Yeah.
without saying anything.
And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are like, okay, well, tell me what to do there. And I think the important thing is that you got to be aware that there is a child dominating the conversation. Let's say at the dinner table, and they are just telling story after story after story, and there's one of your children that are sitting there and they haven't said a word. And so sometimes as a parent, you have to kind of be a referee and say, okay, well, thanks for sharing that. So-and-so, Johnny, how was your day? What was going on for you? And they'll be like, I don't know, and there might be one or two words. You've got to follow up. You can't just settle with the I don't know. You got to well, tell me something.
Right. Well, teaching them the idea of what an opened-end question or answer is versus closed. So answering, many of our kids will just, if they're not big into talking, they'll be like, or yes, or no. And you say, yes, what do you mean? Or explain yourself. So just that soft probe to go a little bit deeper teaches them that skill.
Right. So that, like you said, as a parent, it's important that we ask more open-ended questions, not a yes or a no, one-word answer. It needs to be like, share with me a little bit about your day. How did it go?
Right.
And not just accepting the one word.
I'm sitting here thinking, you remember our older son, Zach?
Oh, yes.
So Zach he was our quiet child.
I hope he's listening.
Yeah, I'll make sure he gets to listen to this. And he was our quiet child. And because he had two parents that were counselors, one of our regular things was, well, how are you guys doing today? And a simple answer of fine usually just did not suffice. We were always dug a little bit more. And I remember him saying, you said something like, well, what's on your mind? What's on your mind? And he just looked at you and said, why does something always have to be on my mind? Sometimes I'm not thinking of anything.
Yeah. It's like, okay, just want to make sure.
I got it. Okay, yeah, you're good. Just keep rolling.
Because, in some cases, that is a sign of depression. And so you don't want to ignore that there could be a child there who is suffering in silence or anxiety. They're just so anxious that they're balled up with things inside. And so for him, there was nothing of that.
Yeah.
But, I just needed to make sure.
Yeah.
And once he told me.
And he needed to say that.
Right.
Yeah. He needed to finally be pushed to the point of saying that, which helped us understand that he was okay.
Yeah.
Another thing is we have people, and this, I find this not just with kids. I find this with adults, that they give advice or weigh in on things even when it wasn't asked for, when it's not being solicited. And
are you talking to me? Because I can be really guilty of that.
It's giving that advice, and when we are giving advice when people don't want to listen, it'd be like if we made everybody listen to rock solid radio, as your punishment, you all have to listen, and it's like people aren't ready to learn unless they turn it on.
Right. They're ready for change.
Yes. And so that whole idea of when you look into somebody's eyes and they're not really receiving your message, that you would pick up on it and go, maybe now's not the right time, or maybe my advice is not really warranted here.
Right. And we have children, and we work with a lot of families where the child does believe that they have the best answer and they are ruling the roost, and they will give unsolicited advice. And it's really, really, mom and dad, it's really important that you establish, well, I appreciate your input, but I'm the mom, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm the dad, and this is my decision. You're not the mom. And it's hard because they want to kind of give that. But they need to know when it's appropriate and when it's not.
Yeah. How about just, this is, we've been guilty of this, expressing like a sarcasm that is even borderline sarcasm.
Oh, my goodness.
And that we get so comfortable with doing that, especially with the people that we know, that these turn into habits, especially with younger kids. Habits. And the next thing you know, they're being rude or offending someone outside of that circle and not always being received very well.
Right. Disrespectful.
And so all of a sudden you're going to a parent-teacher conference with your kid, and the teacher says something like, sometimes they're very offensive or abrasive towards, myself or the other kids. And it's like, oh, well, we just just do that at
Right,
home.
right.
Well, what are we teaching the kids?
And, I had a sit down one time with a mom and a dad who was just so worried about their daughter, who was so sharp-tongued, was so disrespectful, so rude and offensive. And they were like, we don't know what to do with her. But honestly, I had to be real honest with those parents. Like, that's you guys. You talk to each other that way. You talk to the kids back that way. Like, you're modeling for her what's okay. And then you're upset when she does it. Well, it's called looking in the mirror. Like, she's reflecting back what she's hearing from you.
Yeah.
So we really got to watch that in our own home. And we've been guilty of that too.
How about this one? The idea that you hear this all the time. Boy, kids can be so cruel. They can be so mean. And, we saw that in the school setting when you have kids that are being somewhat picked on or made fun of. And the kid that's being hurt by this is offended, and the other kids aren't reading that they're offending, and that's that lack of empathy.
Right.
Kids oftentimes have to be taught empathy, and so empathy is not sympathy, right? We're not talking about feeling sorry for people. We're talking about, when someone's not in a good way, when somebody's hurting or stressed or whatever it is, if you don't read that, the stuff that you're saying all of a sudden turns into you picking on them. Yeah. And that's that's that whole idea of the next thing you know, the kid's being called a bully because he's making fun of a kid and he didn't mean it, but he wasn't reading that it was hurting somebody.
And hon, we've had this conversation around our dinner table or in the car where our kids will say something cruel about someone, and it may be true. For instance, they may smell.
But our kids?
No,
that was a good chance of that.
Well, that's true. Days and some, but. No, like if there is someone sitting next to them in class that is, doesn't bathe or has, body odor or something, but to try to help them understand, like, what you say may be true, but is it kind? Yeah. Should it be repeated? Sometimes the kids will come home with stories or rumors, and they're like, but Mom, it's true. I saw it myself. And I'm like, but that doesn't mean it should be repeated.
Right. Or teaching them a better way to actually help the kid.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, maybe that kid does need some help with that. Whether you work with a teacher to get that kid help or whatever, empowering your kid to help the situation so that kid doesn't continue
but the communication needs to be
having that problem.
Not laughing at it,
yes,
not entertaining it and, promoting it, but to help them understand this isn't something you want to repeat or say out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. So. How about this one? The idea that when we see kids that are naturally drama queens, if we could,
kings,
or kings, like everything's a big deal. Everything gets blown up, and whether they are the tattletales, whether they are quick to say that they've been wronged on something. When we see kids that quickly jump into the drama. They get coined different names like drama queen or whatever. But the next thing you know, people are avoiding that person. They're avoiding conversation with that person because they're like, I don't even want to go down the road that this person's going to take me. Right.
They need to know that does affect why your friend doesn't want to invite you over. Why
everything's a big deal.
Yeah. So you got to help them to see. And also, and you've seen this before, hon, the child really can dictate, if you let it, the temperature of the home. So if they're escalating quickly, if they're getting angry at every little thing or dramatic and, upset about everything.
They pout a lot.
Oh my goodness, that's hard. It's hard to live with. So don't let it dominate your home.
Right. As a parent, you do your kids so much more good by pointing it out. And then teaching them more appropriate ways, And when we had our kids, when they would pout over stuff that, maybe that they were bothered or hurt by something, but there's an appropriate time and level of mourning that. And so teaching them, I remember our oldest, when he was a little bitty guy, he would start to cry. And it's like, so you're not dying, you're okay. And crying is not going to get you to get your way. So you go up in your room and you handle this on your own without disrupting the family. And when you're finished, you can come down.
Yeah,
Okay?
and we're not saying that boys crying is wrong.
No, not at all. Yeah,
it's just sometimes not the way to handle
right.
disappointment.
When the drama has gone too
Right.
far, because drama is often used as a leverage tool
Manipulative
to get attention.
tool.
Yes,
Passive
to get
aggressive.
something-
Yes.
And so I'm going to heighten the volume
Right.
on this.
You know, hon, one of the ones that I feel is really important to share as a parent is the whole idea of when to be included in the conversation. So as a mom and a dad, I teach this a lot with parents, that the kids need to know when mom and dad are talking that you're not to interrupt, that you're not the center of the attention. And I want mom and dad to say, hey, mom and dad are talking right now. I will get to you in a little bit, to show them patience, to show them authority, to show them the priority of your relationship as a husband and wife over a mom and a dad. We let our kids dominate the pace of the day and of the schedule of the family. And sometimes we just need to put that in a proper order of, nope, not right now. I'm not going to, I know your wheel needs to be pumped up. I'll be out there in a little bit. Dad and I are talking right now.
Yeah, just knowing the time and the place for
To interrupt.
conversation.
Yeah.
And, one of the last things here, I mean, we could go on a list of a bazillion different things that we all struggle with communication, but also letting your kids know who their audience is that they're speaking with. When I speak with a group of same-age peers, my voice and tone and message may be very different than if I'm working with a group of senior elders or what have you.
second graders
or whatever. So
it's very different.
Letting them learn, okay, wait, this is my audience. How should I talk to them?
But that's funny that you say that, though, hon, because we also want to teach our kids, even if you're on the playground with your peers, there's still a level of respect and decency, whether your parents are around or not. And we try to teach our kids that. Like, I don't want to hear about you saying something that's inappropriate. I have ears and eyes everywhere.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so these are all of these challenges that we have. So let's start to wrap this into, well, what are we going to do as parents? How are we going to help our kids roll through this?
Yeah.
So, one of the things is understanding, as we talked earlier, about the communication is way more than words. And so teaching your kids how to listen. That listening is as important, if not more important, than actually speaking.
And the 80% of nonverbals, the active listening of eye contact, tone, voice inflection, all those things are as important as the words.
Yeah, and so how do you teach your kids this? You make it part of your conversation with them. You make them practice the skill of listening.
Right, eye contact.
How about the eye contact?
Yep.
This is, now, we could get into the whole sideline topic of kids with autism and how making eye contact is very difficult. When we have exceptions to that, we deal with the exceptions for what the exception is.
But generally speaking,
when we're talking about the general rule, I want my kids, in the United States, one of our cultural things is that we do make eye contact.
Right.
We're in Asian cultures, eye contact can sometimes be taken the wrong
offensive,
way.
yeah.
So, but in this culture, eye contact's important. So getting your kids to look at you, looking at others when they're speaking is critical.
Right, exactly. So like we said, understand the words of the face, the body, the tone. Those are all important. And we are losing that in the days of texting now. So please, if you're an adult and you're trying to communicate something important to a child or another adult, please don't do it through a text or an email or a Snapchat or an Instagram. Let's do it face to face, eye to eye, in person.
Yeah. If you're wondering like how you would teach this, this is a fun thing. Like when I was at the elementary school and I would work with the younger kids, the first, second graders and stuff, we would have a blast with this. We would have kids make different kinds of faces. They weren't allowed to use any words or anything. Make different kind of faces, do different kind of things with their body. And the rest of us would have to guess, what are they saying?
Reading them, yeah.
That's a mean face. Or that's a
They're
sad face.
Yeah.
And so this is something that as a parent, early on, our little granddaughter, we already practice this stuff with her. Well, this is a happy face.
Yeah.
This is a sad face. So this is just part of the education of communication.
Speaking of our granddaughter, is she adorable or what? But
she's cute.
I love it when we're FaceTiming and they live 12 hours away. But, I love it when they're FaceTiming and our son or daughter-in-law will say, ask Mama and Papa a question. Like they're teaching her how to communicate at the age of 3.
Yes.
Like that's so important.
Yeah. we ran through some of these things, and we just wanted to point them out. Now is the time at a young age that you teach and I love when parents do this, when parents come over and say hi to Mr. Hutchinson, shake Mr. Hutchinson's hands. Okay, look at Mr. Hutchinson.
Yep.
And these are things that are critical. So teach this, just let this be part of what your daily training is with your kids.
Yes, greeting people when people enter a room or, are introduced to somebody, to teach them it's okay to say, we're learning how to do this. It's not wrong to do that. Yeah. Ask others how they're doing. Just shows that, care, like whatever's in my world is not as important as you right now. So how are you doing? When to be quiet is important.
Yes.
When to speak and when to be silent. We all can use some help with that, including myself.
I'm getting quiet on that one right now. Okay, so for your homework, the idea as a parent, what could we do here? Just start the practice. Just be mindful. Don't let your kids just slough off on these things. The practice, and we've always thought that the practice is a little bit easier when they're actually involved with other adults, like ordering food in the restaurant. So that's something that you can do. The main thing that I worked with our kids and the kids at school when I worked with them was your kid comes into contact with an adult. If they're a school attending child, they're coming in with adult contact multiple times every day.
Yep.
Different teachers, greetings in the mornings.
Aides, other parents.
These are great people that your child should be practicing and working with.
Yep.
Good morning, Mrs. Smith. How are you?
Yep.
Look at all the practice we could get.
Right.
With that.
And if you're not very good at it, then practice with them. You're the coach. You're supposed to be modeling this. And if you're kind of struggling in these areas, then it's time to step up your game, because we're generationally not teaching this to our kids.
Yeah. And if you are wondering how your kids do out in public, like at school, ask their teachers.
Yeah.
How's my kid doing in this area?
Yeah, that's
we always ask how they're doing in reading and spelling and all that. How does my child
social
do?
Skills.
Yeah, with the social skills, with the communication side. And if the teacher says, they're kind of quiet, it's hard to get much out of them.
Yep.
Man, that's a great thing for you to listen to.
Yep.
Because we've seen this a lot. Man, the child never shuts up at home.
Exactly.
But when they go to school, they're very quiet.
Exactly. Or do they have friends, to ask the teacher? And sometimes the teacher will say, no, it's really kind of sitting by himself. It might be because they are kind of sharp with the tongue and they do put kids down, and kids don't want to be around that. Or maybe they don't interact and engage with other kids. So, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Important. Okay, so we're going to wrap up communication. Yeah. And we just want to say thank you again to our sponsors. We want to thank Maxwell Construction for getting behind us and just supporting, not just Rock Solid Families and Rock Solid Radio, but supporting our community. They do a great job of that. So we want to thank them for that.
And Jim Mansfield, thank you, Jim, for just coming alongside us and just really being a community supporter and an encourager of this ministry and so many other things going on great in the community. So thank you to Mansfield Insurance Agency. So, Hun, we just want to thank our listeners for supporting Rock Solid Radio and Rock Solid Families. And for Merrill and I, we just want to thank you for your support. Go out and make it a great day. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. For help or more information about what you've heard on today's show, contact us at rocksolidfamilies.org or call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. Again, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency. If you have questions you'd like answered on our show, or you want to chime in on something you heard, go to our Facebook page, Rock Solid Families. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tune in next week for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, and for my husband Merle and I, thanks for tuning in to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time.